Hey, I'm back, and we are in our textbook, the Adobe Photoshop CC book for digital photographers by Scott Kelby. We're working in chapter 7, and this time I'm going to demo making tricky selections. It's his page 211 in chapter 7. You want to open this image, and what he indicates at the beginning of the chapter, or at the beginning of this particular exercise, is that most of the selecting jobs we need to do in Photoshop are fairly easy, and typically most of them I do with either the magic wand, the lasso, or I use the pen tool for a lot of intricate detail. But the one that's always kicked our butts, and this is absolutely true, is when we have to select hair. Over the years, he's come up with different tricks, but all these techniques went right out of the window when Adobe supercharged the Quick Selection tool in Photoshop CS5 with the Refine Edge feature. This is hands down one of the most useful and powerful tools in all of Photoshop. So we're going to start by opening an image that has a challenging area to select, like this subject's hair. We're going to get the Quick Selection tool, which is W, and make sure I actually have the Quick Selection rather than Magic Wand, which I do. And then here's how it works. You just take the tool and loosely paint over the areas you want to select, and it expands to select the area, kind of like a smarter version of the Magic Wand tool, but using different technology. One thing he's learned about this tool is that it actually seems to work best when you use it quickly. Really zoom over your subject with the tool and it does a pretty decent job. Here he selected the subject, and while he can see some problems, like the gray of the area behind or beneath her arm and on her side, it's not bad. Alright, so we've got the Quick Selection tool, and I am going to do just as he's indicated. I'm going to try to select this fairly quickly. All right, if it selects too much, which it has in some of my areas, I can press and hold the Option if I'm on a Mac, or Alt if I'm on a PC, and paint over that accidentally selected area to remove it from the selection. So I want to paint over this to remove it. Geez. And I want to paint over this to deselect it. And actually he has a little bit more of that hair, it looks like, so I am going to click and drag this painting over some of her hair here. You know, he says on page 212, here's something else I've learned about the Quick Selection tool. While it's pretty good at selecting, it's not always as good as deselecting, which is true. You don't want like the gray area between your arm and her side. When I deselected that area, it also deselected some of her hair and scarf. So I had to reselect those, which is actually what I tried to do as well. I'm going to hit that deselection. All right. If it isn't working, try switching to the Magic Wand tool, pressing and holding the Option and just clicking once in an area to instantly deselect it. All right, that's not exactly the way I'd like it, but we'll go on. All right, so now here comes a very important part of this stage of the process, step 4. That is making sure that when you select your hair, you don't select any background area with it. In other words, don't let there be any hair selected with a gray background, which I have, showing through. In fact, I basically follow the rule that I don't get too close to the outside edges of his subject's hair unless an area is pretty much flat. No flyaway, tough to select hair in that area. So you can see what I mean in the close-up here when I avoided the inner edges of her hair. We'll let Photoshop select those hard parts. We'll just hit close to the edge and then stop. So he's actually deselected some of this here. Looks like. Right now, we're most concerned with avoiding selecting areas where you can see the gray background through her hair. So again, I probably want to deselect that as well. Holy moly, I want to select a little bit more than that. Let's see if I can get it a little bit better than that. If you accidentally select an area with gaps, and it's okay too, with a quick selection tool, press and hold Option and paint over the gap areas to deselect them, which is what I've done. All right, now once your selection looks pretty decent, then we are going to unlock the real selection power. The quick selection tool is just the warm-up act. So we're going to go up to the options bar, and we're going to click on the Refine Edge button. And that's going to bring up a dialog box. This is where the magic happens. In the Refine Edge dialog box, you have a number of choices for how you can view your selected image, including just the standard old marching ants. But for now, as a part of our learning process, we're going to go ahead and choose black and white. This shows your selection as a standard layer mask. As you can see, the quick selection tool by itself isn't getting the job done. The edges are jaggy and harsh, and there's no wispy hair selected at all. That's okay because we're just getting started. All right, we're going to see what we're going to do here. What the heck is that right there? I don't know if that's an actual hair. I think that's a strand. But next we're going to turn on the Smart Radius checkbox. And we won't see anything happen just yet. Smart Radius is the edge technology that knows the difference between a soft edge and a hard edge, so it can make a mask that includes both. This checkbox is so important that he leaves it on all the time. If you want it always on as well, just turn it on and then turn on the Remember Settings checkbox at the bottom of the dialog box. Now again, just for learning purposes, drag the radius slider all the way over to 250. Holy moly, that's cool. And all of her hair gets selected instantly. Pretty amazing, isn't it? It is. Well, it did a great job on her hair. There are still parts of her, like her hand on her hip, that are being over-selected. So those areas will wind up being transparent, and you don't want that. So we have to back it down a bit. I just wanted you to see the incredible math at work. Wow, that is pretty cool. So step 7 on page 214, we're going to drag that radius slider back down until her hand on her hip looks more solid white. This is how it works. We want our subject to be solid white, and we want the background to be solid black. Anything that appears in gray will be semi-transparent. That's okay if this happens in her hair and wispy areas, but it's not good on her arms or clothes or anything that's supposed to have a well-defined hard edge. All right, so he rolled back his radius to almost 60. Let's take this back a bit. And you can see these areas are starting to become more opaque or more white, but not so much. Now I'm losing her hair. Still seems to be some transparency there. But anyway, he leaves his somewhere in the mid-60s. I've bumped it up to 75, and that still is, let's see if I can go down just a little bit. Okay, there we go. That's a little bit better. That's 67. All right, by the way, for simple selections, leave the radius amount down low. When you have a tricky selection like fine hair blowing in the wind, you just have to increase it. So remember, trickier selections mean higher radius amounts. Okay, so now we're going to change the view to overlay to see if there are any areas that we've missed. The parts that are selected appear in full color, and the parts that aren't appear in red. If you see the background color showing through, in our case gray, you've got a problem, and we do here, so do I, right here on the left side. So you need to tell Photoshop exactly where the problem areas are so it can better define those areas. You do that with the Refine Radius tool, which is here, I believe. Anyway, it says it's shown circled here. I don't see it yet. All right, and that's where I thought it was here. If you click and hold, there's a Refine Radius and Erase Refinements tool. We want the Refine Radius tool. It's by default active, so just take your cursor and simply paint over the areas where you see the background peeking through. And I wonder if that's not supposed to show, see, it's making it more gray instead of less gray. All right, I'm going to test this by showing black and white. Okay. This is, anyway, so just take your cursor, simply paint over the areas where you see the background peeking through, and it redefines those areas. This is what picks up that fine hair detail. And as you look around her hair, if you see part of it that is tinted red, we're going to go back over on overlay. These parts aren't selected, so just paint a stroke or two over those areas like he's doing here. And they become full color, letting you know they're added to your selection. As Photoshop refines those edges areas where you're painting. It'll look like a painting in white sometimes, but when you've done, it's redefined the area and tells Photoshop that this area needs some work, and it redoes its thing. Here he's gone over some edges that were tinted red on the left side of her hair. And on the right side, you can see those areas are now appearing in color. He also increased the radius a bit. All right, step 10. He recommends avoiding the Adjust Edge section sliders in the center of the dialog altogether. these because you'll spend too much time fussing with them, trying to make them work. Down at the bottom of the dialog box, there's a Decontaminate Colors checkbox, which basically desaturates the edge pixels a bit. So when you place this image on a different background, the edge color doesn't give you away. Just below that, you've got to choose what the result of all this will be. Will your selected subject be sent over to a new blank document, or just a new layer in this document, or a new layer with a layer mask already attached? I always choose to make a new layer with a layer mask in the same document. That way I can just grab the brush tool and fix any areas that might have dropped out, which we're probably going to have to do with next. So choose New Layer with Layer Mask and click OK. Not too bad, though again. All right, so when you click OK, your image will now appear on a transparent layer as shown here and shown on my screen. And if you look in the Layers panel, you'll see a new layer with a layer mask attached, which is right here. You can also see it does a pretty amazing job. It won't get every little thin wispy hair strand, but it gets most of the important ones. And he's got a trick or two coming that will help a bit more. First, let's do a quick check of that mask and fine tune it just a bit before we put her over on a different background. So we're going to press and hold Option if you're on a Mac, Alt if you're on a PC, and click directly on that layer mask thumbnail in the Layers panel to see just the mask. Now zoom in tight on her arm on the right, and you can see some areas that aren't solid white, which means those areas will be semi-transparent, and that's not what we want for her arm. So get the brush tool, B for the brush tool, and then we are going to paint with a foreground color, turn to white. Choose a small hard edge brush from the brush picker. And then we are going to paint right over those grayish areas to make them solid white. You can see some areas on the side of her head where her earring and scarf aren't selected that need a cleanup as well. Next, you're going to press X to switch your foreground color to black. To clean up any areas where the white has spilled over onto the black. Just exactly what I was thinking this had done right here, just a bit. Shaky fingers. Oh, for heaven's sakes, I'm making it worse than it was. That should be solid black in the background areas. For a little help cleaning up tricky areas, switch your brush's blend mode to overlay. That way, when you're painting with white, it automatically avoids painting over the color black and vice versa. All right, sorry guys. I may put you on hold here and come back when I have this done. I'll be right back. Okay, at this point we should be just about done with our mask. Oh, I see something there again. Oh my goodness. All right, let's see what that is. Whoa. Turn this on to overlay. I'm not sure what that is, but I definitely don't like what it's looking like. I feel like I need some white there, but I can't seem to get that in. So yeah, that looks worse than what it did before. So that would be definitely something that I would work with as well. Not quite sure how I made that happen, but okay, let's move on. So we have then on step 13, at this point we're done with the mask. Hopefully you are. I'm not quite done yet, but I'll come back and work on it a little bit later. We are going to apply it permanently to our image by clicking directly on the layer mask thumbnail in the layers panel. And then we're going to drag it to the trash icon at the bottom of the panel, layers panel. And then it's going to say, do you want it to apply the mask to layer before removing? You want to click apply. And then you will see that indeed the mask is applied. Next, we're going to open the background image, but I think this is probably taking a little bit longer than what we want it to take. So I am going to sign off here, and I'll be back with the remainder of this a little bit later.